When I hit that emergency shutdown at 3:17 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, 340 container cranes across the port of Long Beach froze mid-operation. 12 cargo ships sat dead in the water, unable to receive docking instructions. Loading schedules went dark. 6 years of flawless port automation died in the span of 4 seconds. And I watched it all happen from a coffee shop window overlooking Terminal Island, sipping black coffee while Brandon Walsh's digital transformation crumbled in real time on my laptop screen. My name is Garrett Stone. I'm 54 years old, and I've been running maritime systems consulting for 16 years, ever since I got out of the Navy, where I spent 22 years managing electrical systems on nuclear submarines. Started my service at 18, worked my way up through the ranks until I retired at 40 as a chief petty officer. Learned real quick that when your navigation fails 300 feet underwater, people don't just miss schedules, they die. I live in a modest house about 15 minutes from the port. Got a workshop in the garage where I build custom control interfaces. No fancy marketing, no social media presence. My clients find me when their port operations are falling apart and someone's career is on the line. That's how I ended up working with Pacific Terminal Operations 6 years ago. Carl Hudson, their harbor master back then, called me on a Friday morning. His voice had that edge you hear when a man's watching his life's work collapse. Garrett, we just had our third near collision this month. Coast Guard is threatening to shut us down. I need someone who understands how this stuff actually works, not some consultant who learned port management from a computer screen. Carl was old school. Came up through the ranks operating cranes before computers ran everything. He understood that behind every digital display and automated system, there's actual machinery that has to function in the real world. When I walked into their control center that first day, the chaos was obvious. Cranes operating without coordination. Ships waiting hours for berth assignments while dispatchers made phone calls trying to figure out available space. Container stacks growing randomly because the tracking system couldn't communicate with the yard management software. We've got 4 different systems that don't talk to each other, Carl explained, walking me through the yard. Crane control uses one program, the ship scheduling uses another, and container tracking is basically manual. Every shift change, we lose 3 hours just trying to sync everything up. I spent the next 24 months building them a real system. Custom algorithms that learn the specific traffic patterns of Long Beach operations. Crane synchronization that actually communicated with ship navigation systems. GPS integration that tracked every container in real time and optimized yard space dynamically. 180,000 lines of code. Every algorithm, every database structure, every hardware interface built from scratch and tested until it ran flawlessly. The results were immediate. 0 ship delays, no more crane conflicts. Containers flowing through the terminal like a well-oiled machine. Coast Guard inspectors came through twice after implementation and found no safety violations. Carl would send me emails with actual data, not corporate thank you notes, but detailed reports on efficiency improvements and cost savings. He understood what he was paying for, and more importantly, what he was getting. The contract was crystal clear. They leased operational access to my system. I retained full ownership of all code, algorithms, and infrastructure. Carl signed it without hesitation because he understood the difference between using something and owning it. For 6 years, everything ran perfectly. Monthly payments arrived on time. The system performed exactly as designed. Carl would call occasionally with questions about optimization or expansion possibilities, always respectful of the boundaries we'd established. Then Carl retired. Brandon Walsh arrived 2 weeks later with his MIT computer science degree and his leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Late 20s, designer everything, and the kind of confident smile people wear when they think they've just inherited the keys to digital transformation. His first email wasn't a greeting or an introduction. Subject line: Legacy System Assessment Protocol. The message was pure corporate speak about modernization initiatives and AI-driven optimization paradigms. My system hadn't changed in 6 years. Same functionality, same performance, same scope of work. But Brandon saw a line item on a budget sheet and immediately assumed there was inefficiency to be eliminated. I replied professionally, attaching the original contract and a brief summary of system performance metrics. Basic courtesy, nothing more. His response came back within 90 minutes. Need to schedule comprehensive evaluation of outdated infrastructure dependencies. Please prepare legacy documentation for machine learning integration assessment. Machine learning integration. That phrase told me everything I needed to know about Brandon Walsh. He was the kind of executive who thought complex industrial systems could be replaced by reading research papers about artificial intelligence. I started preparing, not documentation for his assessment, but the tools I'd need when this conversation went exactly where I knew it was heading. 4 days later, the email I'd been expecting arrived. Subject line: System migration requirements. Brandon requested complete transfer of all system architecture for internal AI development and automation optimization. That's when I knew for certain he didn't want to evaluate our service agreement. He wanted to steal my system and hand it over to some algorithm. I drafted a response that was technically accurate and completely unhelpful. Happy to provide everything included under your current lease agreement. Then I opened my laptop, navigated to the master control console that managed every aspect of their operation, and started building Brandon Walsh's education in the difference between access and ownership. The lesson was about to begin. The next morning brought another email from Brandon, subject line: Infrastructure transition timeline. He wanted to know whether the operational control framework belonged to Pacific Terminal Operations. Operational control framework. That's what he called 6 years of custom-built crane coordination algorithms, ship scheduling protocols, and real-time container tracking systems, like it was some kind of digital asset he could download and improve with machine learning. I screenshot the relevant contract clause and sent it back to him. Bold text, impossible to misinterpret. All system logic, design, architecture, and source code remains the sole property of Garrett Stone. Licensed for operational use only. No transfer, no replication, no derivative development. Carl had understood that clause perfectly when he signed it. You don't buy a custom port management system like you're purchasing software licenses. You lease access to infrastructure that took years to develop and requires ongoing maintenance from the person who built it. 3 hours later, Brandon's response landed in my inbox. We will be transitioning to internal AI-driven solutions effective immediately. Thank you for your legacy contributions. That was it. No discussion, no transition planning, no acknowledgement that he was about to disconnect the central nervous system of their entire port operation. Just corporate, speak for you're fired, and we're replacing you with artificial intelligence. I leaned back in my office chair and looked out at the harbor. Somewhere in that converted garage workshop sat the physical control panel I'd built specifically for the Pacific Terminal system. Custom hardware interface with dedicated switches for every major subsystem. Crane coordination, ship scheduling, container tracking, yard optimization, all of it flowing through circuits I'd designed by hand. Brandon Walsh had no idea that control panel existed. He thought the system was just software running on their servers. He was about to learn the difference between a user interface and actual infrastructure. 5 days after his termination email, a calendar invite appeared. Legacy system handover meeting. Friday 2 p.m. Pacific. No agenda, no context. Just a meeting title that suggested he expected this to be a simple file transfer conversation. I joined the video call 5 minutes early. Clean polo shirt. Background showing my home office with my Navy service certificates and maritime engineering license visible on the wall. Professional appearance, nothing flashy. Brandon logged in 4 minutes late, settling into his chair with that satisfied expression executives get when they think they've solved complex problems with simple automation. A woman from IT joined next, Sarah Mitchell according to her screen name. Then a younger guy who looked like he'd graduated last month, probably Brandon's AI specialist. Carl Hudson was nowhere to be seen, not surprising. He'd probably advised against this entire approach, and Brandon had decided his analog perspective wasn't relevant to digital transformation. Garrett, thanks for joining us, Brandon began, his tone suggesting this was just a routine data migration task. We've made the decision to bring port operations into the modern era with AI integration. Appreciate your legacy work, but we're ready to optimize everything with machine learning algorithms. Optimize everything. As if 22 years of submarine electrical experience and 6 years of perfect port operations could be improved by feeding data into some algorithm he'd read about in a tech journal. I kept my expression neutral. You're ending the lease agreement. Is that correct? Correct. Brandon leaned back in his chair like he expected congratulations for his innovative thinking. We'll need complete handover of all code, system diagrams, and back-end access credentials. Standard digital transformation protocol. Sarah Mitchell nodded approvingly. The AI kid typed notes into what was probably an integration checklist. They had this choreographed like a routine software upgrade. I didn't move. You're not licensed to access the core infrastructure. Your agreement covers operational use of the system outputs. You never purchased development rights. Brandon's confident smile flickered for just a moment. We paid for development of this port system, Garrett. That makes it our intellectual property. This is standard industry practice. I leaned forward slightly. You paid for access to a functioning port management network. You never bought the underlying technology. That distinction is clearly outlined in Section 3 of your contract. He glanced away from the camera, probably pulling up the contract on another screen. I waited while he scanned through language that Carl Hudson had reviewed carefully with their legal team 6 years ago. Look, he said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. We understand there might be some technical legacy dependencies here, but we're prepared to handle operations with modern AI solutions going forward. Just send us whatever files you have so we can maintain operational continuity. I'll provide everything you're legally entitled to receive, I replied, nothing more. The silence stretched across the video call. Sarah Mitchell looked uncomfortable. The AI specialist stopped typing. Brandon's jaw tightened as he realized this wasn't going to be the simple asset transfer he'd planned. Fine, he said finally, trying to end the call quickly. We'll expect delivery by end of business tomorrow. I didn't respond immediately, just sat there looking directly into the camera while he fumbled with his mouse, clearly wanting to disconnect before I could placate his timeline further. The screen went black and I closed my laptop. Brandon Walsh thought he understood port technology because he could read AI research papers and analyze operational dashboards. He had no comprehension of the physical infrastructure, the custom hardware, the dedicated communication protocols, or the specialized knowledge required to keep it all functioning. He was about to get an education. I walked out to my workshop and powered up the control panel. Every indicator light showed green. Crane networks synchronized. Ship scheduling updating in real time. Container assignments flowing smoothly through the system. The Port of Long Beach running exactly as I designed it to run. Then I started building Brandon's transition package. Professional-looking documentation with clean diagrams and impressive technical terminology. User interface screenshots showing dashboard layouts and data visualization panels. Everything polished and official-looking, and completely useless, without access to the underlying control systems. I spent the rest of the afternoon creating the kind of deliverable Brandon expected to receive. Visual materials that would make him think he'd gotten exactly what he needed to run AI optimization independently. Interface mockups with animated displays. System diagrams that showed the logical flow of operations. All of it disconnected from the actual infrastructure. By 6 p.m., I had a professional-looking package ready for delivery. I attached it to an email with a single line of explanation. System interface documentation provided per contract termination, no back-end access included. I hit send and watched the message disappear into corporate email systems, where Brandon Walsh would soon discover the difference between owning a computer screen and owning the engine. Then I walked back out to my workshop, sat down at the control panel, and placed my hand on the master shutdown switch. The real lesson was about to begin. The next morning, I drove to Harbor Coffee like it was any other Wednesday, ordered my usual black coffee, no cream, no sugar, and settled into the window table where I could see the terminal operations. The barista, Kelly, had been serving me the same order for 4 years. She nodded, poured the coffee, and left me alone with my laptop. I opened the master control console and brought up the main dashboard. Every indicator showed green. Ships moving smoothly through 12 berth assignments. 340 cranes receiving real-time coordination updates. Container tracking cycling efficiently through 8-yard sectors. Everything Brandon Walsh thought he now controlled was actually flowing through the custom hardware. Sitting in my workshop 15 minutes away. At 3:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from Brandon, having connectivity issues with core management system. Can you provide access credentials? I stared at the message for about 15 seconds, then deleted it without responding. At 3:17 p.m., I toggled the master shutdown relay. The screen froze instantly. Every green indicator went gray. Real-time data feeds dropped to zero. Ship coordination stopped mid-operation. The entire port of Long Beach just stopped talking. I took a slow sip of coffee and watched 6 years of perfect port automation die in complete silence. The system didn't crash or throw error messages. I designed it to fail gracefully. No alarms, no warning lights, no dramatic shutdown sequences, just clean disconnection from all operational control. If someone tried to restart the user interface, it would load perfectly and display cached data, creating the illusion that everything was still working. But underneath, nothing was actually communicating with anything else. For the first 12 minutes, nothing appeared wrong to casual observation. The interface dashboard still showed green status indicators. Dispatchers looking at their screens would see normal ship schedules and crane assignments. Operations already in progress would continue following their last received instructions, but no new data was flowing anywhere. I pulled up the live camera feeds from the terminal. At 3:29 p.m., I watched a container crane sit motionless at the dock where it should have been loading a ship. The coordination protocol was frozen, unable to assign tasks. At 3:35 p.m., 2 ships arrived simultaneously at berth assignments that should have been staggered. According to their navigation systems, both had valid scheduling for Dock 4 at the East Terminal. The traffic management algorithm wasn't running to prevent conflicts. By 3:45 p.m., the ripple effects became visible. Ships backing up at harbor entrances. Crane operators manually trying to coordinate loads while their computers insisted everything was automated. Container stacks growing randomly because the tracking system couldn't update locations. I refreshed my email inbox. Nothing yet. They were probably still trying to figure out why their AI optimization system wasn't responding to input commands. At 3:52 p.m., the first confused email arrived. Subject line, quick question, system lag issue. Hi Garrett, seeing some delays on crane coordination updates. Can you take a look when you get a chance? Thanks, Aaron Cross. Aaron was their operations supervisor. Former Coast Guard, understood systems thinking. He'd figure out what was happening once the pattern became clear, but right now he was just seeing symptoms. I didn't respond. By 4:15 p.m., the emails were arriving every few minutes. Ship scheduling not updating. Crane coordination failures. Multiple vessels assigned to same berth. Still polite. Still assuming this was some kind of technical glitch that could be resolved with a quick support call. At 4:23 p.m., my phone started ringing. Unknown Long Beach number. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call from a different number. Then a third. The panic was beginning. I pulled up the system logs and watched connection requests hammering uselessly against the documentation package. Brandon's team was trying to operate live port infrastructure using interface screenshots. Hundreds of failed authentication attempts. Every request bouncing back empty because there was no actual system behind the user interface. They were trying to dock ships using only pictures of a harbor. By 4:30 p.m., the situation had deteriorated significantly. Harbor traffic backing up at 6 major approach channels. Crane coordination conflicts at 15 different berths. Ship schedules falling behind by an average of 73 minutes across the port. And somewhere in a corporate office building, Brandon Walsh was probably staring at AI dashboards that still showed everything optimized perfectly, wondering why reality didn't match his algorithms. At 4:38 p.m., an email arrived with red priority flags. Subject line, urgent port failure critical, multiple operational conflicts. No response from automated systems. Ship assignments completely out of sync. This is affecting Coast Guard compliance status. Need immediate support. Troy Bennett, the corporate confidence was cracking. They were starting to understand that this wasn't a minor software glitch. I closed the email without reading the rest and checked the financial impact calculator I'd built into my monitoring tools. Conservative estimate: $2,200,000 in daily losses from delayed shipments, missed schedules, and compliance violations. Real number was probably higher once you factored in supply chain disruption and contractual penalties. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. Emergency situation. Call immediately. I deleted the message. At 4:45 p.m., the phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Pacific Terminal Legal Department. I declined the call and watched it go to voicemail, then another call from a blocked number. Declined. By 5 p.m., I had 62 missed calls and 31 unread voicemails. The Port of Long Beach was experiencing what the Navy would call a cascading systems failure. Nothing was coordinating with anything else. Ship captains were making docking decisions based on stale data. Harbor pilots were issuing conflicting navigation instructions. Terminal managers were trying to manually assign berth space while their computers insisted everything was running AI optimization. I opened a new document on my laptop and started typing. Emergency system restoration, terms and conditions, due via wire transfer before reactivation. Rate: 3x standard monthly fee for immediate restoration service. Duration: 48-hour emergency window. Conditions: full acknowledgement of service terms and intellectual property ownership. I attached the document to an email addressed to Brandon Walsh, legal counsel, and the port director. Subject line: emergency restoration services available. Then I hit send and ordered another cup of coffee. The education phase was complete. Now came the negotiation. At 5:12 p.m., the calendar invite arrived. Emergency Port Conference, 5:30 p.m., Pacific. Immediate response required. No polite corporate language this time. Just panic in capital letters. I joined the call at 5:28 p.m. Professional appearance, calm demeanor, sitting in my home office with my maritime engineering certificates visible in the background. The screen filled with stressed executives in various stages of crisis management. Troy Bennett, some kind of VP, joined first. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, the look of a man who'd spent the last 3 hours in emergency meetings. Then came legal counsel. Two attorneys, one taking rapid notes, the other reviewing documents on a second monitor. Aaron Cross, the operations supervisor, appeared next. I'd worked with Aaron during the original implementation. Former Coast Guard, understood port operations. He looked exhausted but unsurprised, like he'd been expecting this conversation for weeks. Brandon Walsh was already in the call when I connected. Positioned in the bottom corner of the screen, small window, muted microphone, body language that suggested he'd been excluded from leadership of his own crisis. Nobody said hello. Troy cleared his throat and dove straight into damage control mode. Garrett, appreciate you joining on short notice. We're dealing with what appears to be a significant system disruption. Port operations are effectively paralyzed and we need to understand our options for immediate restoration. I nodded once. Your lease agreement was terminated yesterday. If you want operational access restored, the terms are outlined in my emergency service proposal. Legal counsel leaned into her camera. Garrett, we've reviewed your proposal. Some of the financial terms seem elevated given the circumstances. Emergency response pricing, I replied. Standard practice when critical infrastructure fails during operating hours. Aaron Cross spoke up, his voice tight with fatigue. Garrett, we've got 12 ships completely offline. Harbor traffic backing up across all approach channels. Coast Guard investigating navigation system failures. He glanced off screen at something. 3 major shipping lines have called threatening contract termination if we don't restore normal operations by tomorrow morning. Troy jumped back in. Look, we understand there may have been some communication issues during the transition process, but we need to focus on solutions. Can we discuss modification of the emergency terms? No, the single word hung in the air. No explanation, no negotiation, no corporate discussion. Just a simple statement of fact. Brandon finally unmuted his microphone. This is unreasonable, Garrett. You're holding our entire port operation hostage over a contract dispute. I looked directly into the camera. You terminated my services and demanded handover of infrastructure you never purchased. I provided exactly what your agreement entitled you to receive. Nothing more, nothing less. He started to respond, but Troy cut him off with a sharp look. Legal counsel tried a different approach. Would you consider a modified payment structure? Perhaps installments over wire transfer only. Full payment before reactivation. Aaron Cross leaned forward. Garrett, what's the timeline for restoration once payment clears? 15 minutes, I said. System comes back online immediately after I confirm funds transfer. Troy looked at his legal team, then back at the camera. We need 10 minutes to discuss internally. Can you hold? I nodded. I'll be here. They clicked into a breakout room, leaving me alone on the call with Brandon's muted video square. He stared at the camera like he wanted to say something. Didn't. I took a sip of coffee and checked my email. The emergency proposal had been forwarded to at least 12 different people in their organization. Finance department, legal department, operations, even their insurance carrier. Everyone trying to understand how a simple AI upgrade had turned into a port-threatening crisis. 8 minutes later, they returned to the main call. Troy's expression had shifted from desperation to resignation. Legal is initiating the wire transfer now. Should complete within 45 minutes. Let me know when it hits my account, I said. 38 minutes later, my banking app chimed with an incoming transfer notification. Payment confirmed, amount correct, no complications. I walked out to my workshop, sat down at the control panel, and flipped the master relay switch back to active. Every screen in my house lit up with green indicators, ship coordination reconnecting in sequence, crane assignments resuming, container tracking coming back online, harbor traffic management updating in real time. The port of Long Beach came back to life, like someone had just restarted the circulatory system of a major metropolitan area. I returned to the video call where everyone was still waiting. System is operational, I announced. All services restored. Troy nodded. We appreciate the rapid response. I didn't do this rapidly, I said evenly. I did this according to the terms you agreed to. Nobody responded. Brandon's camera was still on, but he hadn't said a word since his hostage comment. I left the call without ceremony. For the next 72 hours, I monitored system performance from my kitchen table. Everything ran flawlessly. Ships synchronized perfectly. No crane conflicts, no compliance issues, no missed docking windows, and no communication from Pacific Terminal Operations. No emails, no phone calls, no requests for AI integration consultations. They'd learned to stay quiet. On Monday morning, a new email arrived from a different sender. Strategic partnership discussion. Revised terms from someone named Tiffany Moore, VP of Maritime Strategy. Someone brought in specifically to handle the aftermath without mentioning Brandon Walsh's name anywhere in the correspondence. The offer was substantial. 8-year exclusive contract, enhanced compensation, priority consideration for future port expansion projects, professional language, respectful tone, acknowledgement of intellectual property ownership. I read through it twice, then opened a blank document and began drafting my response. New terms, stricter protections, ironclad ownership clauses. No room for future misunderstandings about who controlled what. 3 weeks later, the signed contract arrived in my inbox. Every clause exactly as I'd written it. No modifications, no negotiations, no corporate wordsmithing. Brandon Walsh's name was nowhere on the signature page. I closed my laptop and walked out to my workshop. The control panel was humming quietly, all indicators green, the port of Long Beach flowing smoothly under my direction. Word travels fast in maritime circles. By the end of the month, I'd received inquiry emails from ports in Oakland, Seattle, and San Diego, all asking variations of the same question: are you available for system development projects? I wasn't naive. They'd heard about Long Beach. They knew what happened when someone tried to replace custom infrastructure with artificial intelligence and steal it from a Navy systems engineer who understood the difference between using something and owning it. That reputation was worth more than any marketing I could have purchased. In this industry, respect isn't something you can buy with an MBA or learn from research papers. You earn it by building systems that work, protecting what you've created, and never backing down when someone tries to take what isn't theirs. I opened my laptop and started typing a new document. 2025 Standard Service Agreement. Garrett Stone Maritime Systems. The foundation was solid. Sometimes the best way to teach respect is to show what happens when it's absent. One shutdown switch at a time. In a world obsessed with replacing experience with algorithms, the real power still belongs to those who understand the difference between running code and running the show.